Hi everyone. This week's module and unit is all about special education, staff performance, work attendance, and its effect on students. It's talking about current trends and conversation just surrounding the special education decline and impact on its learners. All right, so the first piece is talking about the work performance and attendance. This specifically refers to teaching in public schools as well as charter schools. Um, and there's not a lot of research done on the effects of special education staff absenteeism. So, what I had to do and what I'm interested in doing is finding out more about this. But what I looked at first was what do the trends say about teachers? What is teacher attendance in general? What is the work performance in general? And how can that be related to special education staff? So here are the facts. From 2015 to 2017, special educator decline was greater than 17%. So what this means is that more than 17% of special educators were either let go or had open positions in schools. There was a slight decrease from 2015 to 2017, a 4% disability prevalence decrease. But that has since then not been the trend, and it's actually been on an increasing trend of disability diagnoses. So, what do we see now? We see caseloads are increasing. We see that the severity of needs are increasing. And we also see that absences are occurring at higher rates in low income school districts. So, on average, 33.3% of teachers are absent more than 10 days out of the year. Elementary and middle schools, it says it's about 36.7% or 37.8% of teachers being absent more than 10 days out of the school year. So, what this kind of looks like in terms of what the facts say is that as the teacher's workload is increasing, so the caseloads, the severity of the needs of the students, these absences are also increasing. So, why are these important? First reason, there's several reasons, but the first reason was showing that hiring substitutes is extremely costly. And in fact, I found out through this that $4 billion annually is spent on hiring substitutes and covering the absences of teachers in schools across the United States. In addition to that, they talk about how covering absences is timely for administrators and other teachers. And what this looks like is that administrators, principals, vice principals are calling for substitute teachers, they're calling for subplans, and they're doing a lot of the follow up time. Often, and if you guys are in schools like I work at, you even see principals sometimes going in and covering classes themselves. The other stress of this is that it also impacts other teachers. So, a couple times already within the last 2 years that I've been out of school, and then already this year, when teachers are absent, they split the classrooms up and put them into other teachers' classes for that day, which means that their caseload actually increases by anywhere from 10 to 15 students for that day. Other teachers are scrambling to share their plans with the substitute teacher or help cover, providing behavior guidance and behavior management for the classrooms when substitutes are in there, or less experienced teachers are covering the classroom. And those are just a couple of ways that both administrators and other teachers in the school are impacted by this. So not only is the absence of the teacher worrisome, but it also its effect on the rest of the school community. In terms of the school community, the other piece to this is that the opportunities to learn are cut short. So students, that mean each student is missing let's say on average that said 33.3% for high school students are missing 10 days a school year where they don't have their teacher. And when you see that statistic at first, I thought, well, that's not so bad. That's only 10 days. We get much more than that in school vacations each year. But then I started thinking, well, actually, because it's not just the one day that they're absent. You miss one day, and think about our teacher plans and our special education plans and how much we miss and how much we cover in one day. So, if all of that is being missed in one teaching day, it's going to take several days in order for us to catch up on that. So it's not just 10 days of learning that are lost, it's then 10 days that you're behind, 10 days that you're rushing through, and that impacts the future learning for the rest of the week. Especially again, because if you're having substitutes, other teachers, administrators cover for your classroom, you're not guaranteed that your sub plans are actually being followed or are able to be followed. And so this really impacts the learning opportunities for the students. The other piece of this is the equity of public education. So, in looking at the numbers, teachers are more likely to be absent in low-income school districts, in low-income schools. So, public education, in terms of equity, you may be looking at more learning opportunities in a charter school or in a private school than you would in a public school of a low-income district. You're also looking across districts, across socioeconomic status and average income of the population. Some school districts, some schools are going to have higher teacher attendance because of where the school is and the income of the population. So, thinking about that, is schooling equal? And the answer to that, in terms of teacher attendance, is no, it is not, because if the teacher attendance is lower at low income schools, the students are receiving less learning opportunities. They're receiving less specialized teaching and support, and they are experiencing really a deficit in consistency, classroom management, and all around learning and development opportunities. So that's a bigger issue that we should remember and kind of keep track of as we're looking through and as you're reading all of the articles, the websites, and the literature. So hopefully I've been able to convince you why teacher absences are important. Hopefully you've been able to relate this a little bit to yourself as a special educator or teacher, or even when you're a student and having your teacher absent. I know for me, when my teachers were absent, we always watched movies, and it was so wonderful, but then it was not wonderful playing catch up for the next 2 weeks and having extra homework to do. And as we know, there are a lot of other outside factors that are involved with learning, including the home environment and the support of the families. So, understanding teacher absences and why they're important, we also have to look at, well, why are teachers absent? And why is there such a high teacher turnover rate? So, looking at special educators specifically, so not teachers in general, but this slide focuses on just special educators in general. They feel as though there's a lack of support from administrators and colleagues, that they have large caseloads, they have non-teaching responsibilities, excessive paperwork. I don't know if any of us have to do Medicaid billing like I do. Student behavior, which is a big one. Accountability requirements. Lack of opportunity to teach students. And then salary and benefits. So, and it does say in here, some teachers will choose better working conditions over higher compensation. And I think it's very appropriate that salary and benefits is last. So going down the list, experience wise, teachers are most at risk of leaving during the first years in the classroom. There are estimates that suggest that up to 50% of new teachers leave in the first several years. So that's a large number. The other piece of that is part of turnover that we have to consider, look at, is the retirement. Um, if there is a large proportion of teachers, let's say, who are part of the baby boomers and they are on their way to retiring, and they're all, part of that same decade, you might see bigger waves of retirement some years versus others. But in general, most teachers might actually choose to retire early, not so much because of when the year they were born, but actually because of their work related experiences. I had a teacher that I worked with for 6 years at a low income title school, and she chose to retire. She was incredible. She was very gifted. She built strong connections with the students and the families, but she chose to retire because she was experiencing a lot of challenging behavior in the classroom. Her way of always managing challenging behavior, what she was taught when she first began teaching, was a lot different than what they're teaching now. And she admitted that she did not have the same professional development and professional experiences that she would like to have in order to be able to support the populations coming in. So, to be very specific, trauma informed care and trauma impacted children and students that are coming in. She had a very, this is my expectation, this is what we're doing, and, go, go, go. And then was finding that she was losing control over her classroom behavior management and was really struggling to actually keep up with the academics in her classroom because she was constantly having to pause instruction to deal with behaviors. So she's an example of somebody that retired early for that. But I also know many teachers that have not retired but left school districts to go find other districts or other schools with fewer behaviors. So, what that kind of looks like to me is that lack of support from administrators and colleagues. Do you have the support? Do you have the professional development? Are you being educated? Are you being supported in a fashion that allows you to keep up with your work responsibilities? As a special educator, are you doing more one on one teaching, more small group instruction, or more behavior management and counseling? And what did we expect when we first came in? What are we looking at now? We have probably one or two kids on each of our caseload that take up a little bit more time than perhaps what's on their IEP. So do we have that support from administrators and colleagues when we are spending that extra time, or when we are asking for that help in terms of professional development and classroom support? The large caseloads seem to be on an increase as the diagnoses of our incoming student population also increases. We look at the accountability requirements. Who is responsible for each component? Who is responsible for building the connections with the families? Who's responsible for building the relationships with the teachers? And when we talk about, the lack of opportunity to teach students, there has been a shift in the public schools I'm working in lately, in the last year, that I have seen that we're doing more, and now especially with the new COVID regulations, we're doing more push-in services going into the classroom. And how does that impact, our ability to teach students, the opportunities that we have to do that? And is that decreasing? Is it decreasing because of that reason? Is it decreasing because of the large caseloads? And really, what does that make us feel like in terms of our own self-worth? So at the end of the day, how do we feel about our job? How is the student behavior getting to us? How is the lack of opportunity to teach students affecting us? Do we feel appreciated either through the salary we receive or the support we receive from the school? And those are just some of the reasons for teacher turnover in schools for specifically for special education staff. So, looking at the effects of teacher absences, big piece of this is how does this affect our students? As we know, we've done a couple of units on a lot of really important areas within our field. Early intervention, trauma-informed care, using technology. And what I look at for our student relationships is the meaningful aspects of our job beyond just what's on paper. So, building trust, building meaningful communication, building relationships with the family, and establishing some consistency, some normalcy, and some reliability. These are all really important. So if you're not there and you're absent, even 33.3% of teachers that are absent 10 days a school year, what does that look like? Does that affect the trust that you have with a student when you're unable to come and show up for your session? Does that affect your working relationship with them? Taking a few steps forward, making meaningful change academically, behavioral, socially, emotionally, and then having a couple of days off, having a different educator come in and cover. Again, we're talking about substitute teachers coming in and filling our void, our spot, our absence. And what does that look like? Somebody with less experience, less of a relationship with the student. What does that look like for the student? How does that impact their ability to meaningfully communicate with us in the future? In addition to that, think about the families. Special educators have their caseload. They're in charge oftentimes of communicating directly with the families. Families look to them to help answer their questions about what's going on in school, what their child is learning, how their child is doing, and what they can do in the home for their child. So looking at all of that and building that relationship with the family, if the teachers are not present for those learning opportunities, for those school opportunities, how does that impact the family's trust and the family's relationship? So it's really important in all of this to understand how consistency plays into this. Consistency, as we know, as educators, is key. And for us, in terms of attendance, think about it in terms of our students coming in. Our students coming in and learning every single day, that's their consistency, that's when they strive. And that's been shown through research. And so how is our relationship and our attendance at work any different from that? Academically, this is where everything's on paper. This is where we talk about our testing results, our standardized testing, and our achievement. Again, 10 days being absent reduced student achievement in mathematics for a fourth grade classroom by 3.3%. And that was 10 days. For a typically developing student, 3.3% might be a small number. But for a student who is learning using an individualized education plan, 3.3% is quite a bit. We're looking at the impact that this could have on all children, but especially children in special education settings. We also have to look at student absenteeism as a result. If the teacher's out, how does that affect the student? Will the student be out? Student behavioral referrals was another piece of this information. that affected academic achievement. So it wasn't just that the teachers weren't present or the special educators weren't present, but it was also that because they weren't present, there wasn't that consistency, there wasn't that trust, that communication, that relationship with the substitute or any other provider in the school. The student was engaging in behaviors which resulted to higher referrals in the area of dangerous behaviors and inappropriate behaviors in school. And I thought that was a very interesting correlation because, again, our job as special educators is so meaningful. And I don't think we often understand that our absenteeism can actually have greater effects on the student in terms of their academic achievement, of course, because they're not getting those services, but also behavior needs, which could impact additional academic opportunities and academic learning opportunities. So, coping strategies, I added this in because I think it's important to talk about. We're talking about, why teachers are absent, why there's high turnover rate. Then we're talking about the effects on students, academic and social emotional well-being. And so what can we do about it? So we see the correlation, we see the data, and I think this is definitely an area that needs continued support, continued research. But for right now, while we wait for the research to inform our practice and our policies, what can we do? So there are a couple of ways to cope. And in one study, the very first thing that was mentioned was professional development. And I do feel that we talk about this a lot, and we have in this course and in many other courses too, that the more we feel prepared or the more that we feel supported, the greater we are going to feel at work. And so one of the best coping strategies that was listed was professional development. If you feel unsure about something, if you feel insecure in the teachings, if you're not sure how to manage behaviors or really intense academic learning needs or communication needs, professional development can be a way to continue to grow our skill set and give us the confidence and the support that we need to be able to be successful as special educators and teachers. The second one was mentoring and peer mentors. So having somebody within the school to connect to, having somebody to have as a mentor that can offer suggestions, can offer strategies, can help you work through different challenges as they come up. They can also help do some preventative measures and preventative actions that maybe they went through themselves and prevent you as a teacher, as a special educator, from going through yourself. And I think that's a really important piece because it also connects you to the community, the school community. If you're a brand new special educator or a brand new teacher in a school, that already is overwhelming. And so to have a connection with somebody more senior in the school is a great opportunity. Now, I have been at my school district, the school district that I work in across 6 or 7 different schools for 6 years. I am the most senior person there. And the next most senior in special education, the next most senior person in special education has been there for 4 years. And so I think that kind of says a lot too about special education turnover rate. I work in a district that, has really intense behavior needs, high behavioral referrals. Again, we're a title school, we're low income, and we have, as a result, very limited resources. So seniority for these peer mentors may not be great, but I still think it's a very successful and nice way to connect and cope by having a peer mentor in the school and not necessarily having it to be senior as we would think. The other one was listening to music. And whether it's on your commute or you're at school or you're at work or you have it playing throughout the classroom, I thought this was a great way to cope, and I was happy to see that presented in the research. Strong family and friend connections. So having people outside of your school community that you can connect with, that you can work with, and find people to kind of come down from the day at school. Other ways that you can come down from the day at school, he said dancing, exercise, and yoga. Dancing actually had the most research provided as a way to cope for teachers and special educators over exercise or yoga, which I found very interesting. But dancing is a form of exercise, as we know, and it incorporates listening to music. So maybe it's the best of both worlds. And I think that, again, is very important to have that work and personal life balance, to make sure that you are taking care of yourself first as a person so that you can be the best educator that you're able to be, so that you can help so many other students. And so I do think that piece is very important. Now, as part of this research, it talked about how people will use eating and drinking. When I say drinking, I am referring to alcohol, diet sodas, and maybe other less healthy ways of coping, including eating. And so this is important too, because there are ways to cope, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all healthy ways to cope. And so that, is important for us to look at too, especially when if we are peer mentoring, or if we are part of somebody's outside school community. Are we coping in a meaningful and healthy and safe way? And so that was one of the only ones that was listed that seemed to me to be the least healthy out of the others. But the last one I thought was very interesting, and this pertains specifically to special education staff. And it talked about organization participation. So special educators participating in organizations such as Exceptional Children, doing Best Buddies, if you guys have those chapters at your schools, being a part of research organizations, being a part of community organizations, being on the board, and or being part of, even they mentioned less formal groups, so like Facebook groups or social media groups, but being part of an organization seemed to really help people focus their attention and center their thoughts as a really successful way for them to be able to cope outside of school. So those are just a few ways. I know that there's many, and I know that each of us have probably found our own ways to help ourselves cope. But I know, especially for me, looking at this area, it's really important to me. It's important to me because I want to see all of our students meet every milestone, reach their fullest potential. And I truly believe that they can't do that unless we as educators are meeting our own personal needs. We feel prepared, we feel supported, we feel happy, and we feel good enough at work to be able to give those meaningful education and learning opportunities to the students. So, with all of that said, there is a lot more research that needs to be done in this area, but I've included just a couple of references here, and I hope you enjoy this module.